Good evening and welcome to the Monday night edition of the People Show on intellectualradio.com and iHeartRadio, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And I want to ask you if you would please go to our YouTube channel and register for free there so that we can increase our viewership and get greater participation. So I certainly hope that you will like and share the program with others and ask them to join us for healthy dialogue and conversation, to get information that is important and pertinent to our communities and certainly to the development of our communities, and what we must do to affect change. In these times that we're living in, there are very challenging times politically, socially, but this is not anything that is new to the Black diaspora. We have overcome, endured great resistance and challenges. Our foreparents and our forefathers and our ancestors going back 400 years. So what we are experiencing now, which is the challenge of our democratic norms, the challenge of the violating the rule of law, violating the Constitution and due process, and certainly it is all couched and wrapped in racism. And racism, for those of you who think that you have the right definition of racism, racism is not someone who is just bigoted or prejudiced. Racism is a system that can only be put forth by power and control. So racism is prejudice plus privilege plus power. It is couched in a bigotry against a certain group of people with those who have privilege and power to exact systems against other people, and therefore is where you have racism. So Black people cannot be racist. Black people can be bigoted, Black people can be prejudiced, but Black people don't have the power and don't have the privilege to do to a people what white folks have done to Black folks. So when you hear somebody call a Black person a racist, they're really talking about a Black person who may be biased, may be prejudiced, may be bigoted. But we don't have the power, and we certainly don't have the privilege to do to white folks what white folks have done to Black folks. So that is really the true descript of what racism is. Now, there are many forms of it and many components of it. We can get into that conversation. But it just bothers me a little bit when I hear people call Black people racist, because Black people can't be racist. We are not racist. In fact, we're not even interested in doing to another people what has been exacted on our communities. So I just wanted to give that little tidbit opening up the program. So I want to remind you again, please go to our YouTube channel, Mark J. Wallace, The People's Show, and register there. It is absolutely free. There is no subscription cost. We just want to continue to grow our audience and participation, because this program serves not for the purposes of making anybody famous, not for the purposes of making anybody rich or wealthy. What we want to do is enrich ourselves corporately with information and collaboration so that we can collectively and corporately participate with each other in order to exact the kinds of changes and growth and prosperity and enrichment that our communities are enriched, are living healthy in Chicago, Cook County, and the state of Illinois, that we can be the model for what it really means to institutionalize, organize Black political power. We have never, ever been organized before. Hear me clear. We have never, ever been organized. We have mobilized around certain issues, around certain social issues, or events like the Civil Rights Act, or the Montgomery bus boycott, where we have mobilized around these issues, but we have never institutionally organized ourselves so that we become the determiner. That means that we have the power to select candidates, slate candidates, elect candidates, and unelect public officials who are supposed to be serving the commonwealth of our communities. We largely do not select the people that we end up voting for. We've elected over 193 Black people in the Cook County, Chicago, state of Illinois area over the last 40 years, where most of those candidates were selected by somebody else. They weren't selected by us. We voted for them, but they weren't selected by us. And in many regards, many of them legislate and work for the interests of people who selected them or wrote checks for them in terms of their campaign. But we're going to continue talking about that, which is why I founded 10 by 10 to Win, which is the independent Black voting bloc that we are building and organizing here in Chicago and Cook County in order for us to strengthen the voice and the vote of the Black community, not around a personality, but around a people. That's what it is all about. We're going to continue to talk about that, and I want you to join us. So if you have not, text 10x10 to the number 855-909-1385 and get in the text alert, or go to our website at 10 by 10 to win. That's 10x10towin.org, and get engaged in there. All right. You know, this is typically Monroe Monday. Monroe Anderson is usually with me every other week. He was not with me last week. He was with me 2 weeks in a row when we had Tremaine Lee on a couple of weeks ago. Tonight he was supposed to be on. Unfortunately, he got called away on an emergency, and I was able to get my good friend Emma to bring this next distinguished person that I'm going to bring into the studio with me. I've heard him watched him on with Salim Muakil, who has a radio program on the station that I was formerly on for about 10 years. And he is here with me now, and I'm going to bring him on in the studio. His name is Brother William Griggs. Brother Griggs, welcome to the program, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, listen, we have a whole lot to talk about in this next 50 minutes that you're going to be here with me. But I'm going to just give you just a minute or so. If you would just give us a little background of your bio. I don't have a bio, and I purposely didn't ask for one because I'd like for you to tell us a little bit about who you are and what your background is.
Well, I'm a writer. I have a science fiction novel out called The Megalite Connection, which is really more metaphysical than science fiction. I try to put a lot of concepts out in that. I am an artist. I paint. I had a program on that same station you were on many years ago. I've worked in various areas, from child welfare to corporate America, and I've written for The Defender and public radio and done some public speaking at different universities over the years on a number of subjects, most of which are related to what we're talking about, from basically from spirituality to politics of being black in America. So that's about a nutshell, I would say.
All right, wonderful.
I
I've
want-
listened to you a couple of times when I have caught Salim's show, and someone who I greatly respect. And again, our condolences goes out to Salim on the transition of his wife, Carol. And so I've learned a great deal from Salim. I've known about Salim long before I had the opportunity to meet him. He contributed in writing a book about one of the greatest political figures that literally shaped my my political involvement.
Okay.
So I've never met him, but I have studied him, and ever since that I've had the opportunity to witness him, and that is the late great Harold Washington, who was the mayor of the city of Chicago from 1983 until his untimely death in 1987. I moved to Chicago in 1985.
I didn't know him well, but I did know him. Got a picture.
Okay, yeah.
You brought up something.
I never got the opportunity to meet him, but he in my opinion, he gave the city and the residents here, he gave people the feeling that you had a friend on the fifth floor.
He enriched us, empowered us. He provided vision in an area where there was none. Chicago was not familiar with the concept of good government, and he actually brought that into a cesspool, which is what it was, and the whole culture had to get around him because he brought a vision that had been totally non-existent prior to his arrival on the scene. And one of the things I like is that he made it cool to have a vocabulary, because, you know, our community can be a little on the anti-intellectual side and equate having a command of the language with being white, which is stupid, and it's a manifestation of self-hatred. So that was one thing I liked about him, because I tend to spout off with big words myself. So he was like my personal ambassador. But you brought up something when you were talking about black racism, or what they call black racism, that I thought was bore a little bit more expansion. And that is that it is an example of what you would call the false equivalency. And that's something that the media has perpetrated, and that we get perpetrated all the time. You know, it's like the extreme left versus the extreme right. There is no extreme left, and the center is on the right. Okay, but the media has to present itself in the middle in a misguided form of objectivity. You know, so it's like saying, because they always say, well, the truth is somewhere in the middle. So if someone says a woman's pregnant and someone says she's not, I guess to be objective, you'd have to say, well, she's probably just a little pregnant, as opposed to yes or no. And that's what's happening with the collusion of the media in that regard, because for however we feel, there's just absolute, it shouldn't even be mentioned. I mean, it's absurd to say something about, with all the, not just slavery, but the massacres, the lynchings. You got nerve talk about black racism? I don't think so. That's absurd. And it's the kind of thing that seeps in precisely because we are used to having false equivalencies. You know, they do it with media. They say MSNBC is the same as Fox News because one's on the left and one's on the right. That's insane. That's absolutely insane. So I just wanted to give a shout out to what you kind of started and just try to build on it a little bit.
I certainly appreciate that. And as someone who certainly can appreciate someone who can be socially connected across all the spectrums without having to compromise their intellectual ability, but knows how and knew how to adapt communication with any group went to without having to compromise. And I think that, as you say, he did make it cool to be intelligent at the same time while being black.
Yeah,
Because he was
they're not mutually exclusive.
no, they're not mutually exclusive. Because when I hear people say to a black person that, and I heard someone who was having a discussion with Stacey Abrams, and this was a black person who had to note, which I thought was a bit of an insult, that he enjoys talking with someone who is intelligent, that somehow you have to make note of that when it comes to a person.
Well,
you never hear people.
Yeah, that's the new slam. You know, you're so articulate. You know,
Right.
you know, like we all talk like Herschel Walker. Now you're gonna say he's black. If you base it on the capacity to communicate effectively with a specific language skill, he would be. If that's your measure, you wouldn't get any blacker than Herschel Walker, now would you? I rest my case.
Exactly. You and I can have that conversation, and because that conversation can be expanded for hours. And look,
Yes.
there will be a time that I will ask for you to come back and we can continue that dialogue. We have so much going on that I certainly hope that we're able to get to it in this next hour that we have together. The first thing that I wanted to address was these ice raids, and I was waiting to see when, not if, but when they were going to move on the black community, because I have said over and over and over to people who have jumped on this anti-migrant, anti-Mexican, anti-Hispanic bandwagon, that you really don't understand what is happening here if you are not paying attention and you are assuming that these people are your enemies. These are not your enemies. These people are being used to exact a power on, to see if in fact they can get away with it with one group. And if they can get away with it with one group, it is ultimately the group that they really want to be able to exact that power on. And it's not anybody else outside, in my judgment, of black people.
Well, that's just very, very strongly naive to think that. For one thing, the goal has always been to make America great again. And so these Negroes who, you know, wear those caps, and I'm at the point now where they're just persona non grata in my view. I don't argue with them or anything, because for a long time I kept thinking every time Trump did something outrageous, you know, totally, completely racist, you know, will this be enough to bring him back? And it was like, no, of course not. And now it's at the point where it's beyond that point where we know that they are true MAGA. Okay. But when I saw the ICE agents, it took me back to the whole Nazi Germany thing. And the first time I got scared of Trump was long before he became president. I saw a Trump rally. And if you look at a Trump rally and then go back and look at a Nuremberg rally, which were Hitler's rallies as he rose to power, one's in black and white, one's in color. The languages are different. But the enthusiasm, the fervor, I got scared. I had a chill run down my spine just looking at one of his rallies. And now we're seeing him implementing Project 2025, and we're seeing him bring about all the things that fascists do and re-implementing uh, uh, terror. So we're looking at ICE is nothing but the brown shirts of Nazi Germany. That's all they are. They're states sanctioned. They're thugs. They're advertising for thugs. They are obliterating people's rights. And they've always wanted to get rid of ours because we're at the top of the list. But first, you got to go through them to get to us. And he's already accused Haitians of eating people's pets. Okay, and people don't realize it, but this is a Pan-African world. Haitians are black. So if Haitians are a problem in the Supreme Court, because we only have one form of government now. We used to have three, but the other two have abdicated or basically been lost. So there are no checks and balances. Okay, so if they said that they can arrest people based on how they look and how they talk, okay, then they're going to come. They can use the Haitian thing to come after us. There's no due process, and they're fueled by meanness, absolute meanness, and that's what I've been struggling with. The fact that this country has such a history of being mean, evil, and that I don't like to look at it that way. But they're not letting me do it any other way. We know that history, but you don't want to necessarily spend all your time focusing on how wrong they've been, except that it has been revitalized. So this is the land, because I'm trying to understand what's going on. And the only way I can understand it is through historical perspective of this being the land of slavery and lynching and massacres and bombs. 2 bombs have been dropped in America. One of them during my lifetime. Okay, and both of them were on black people. That gives me some kind of context, and it's something that we should be uncomfortable with. So a lot of us are so uncomfortable with that reality that we don't accept it, even though it's staring us in the face. And I think I think we need separation. I don't think you can have one country where a large portion of that country is dedicated to wiping out another portion for purely irrational, silly motives, and that you can't argue with. You can't argue with irrationality.
Yeah, and I think that that it is incumbent upon those of us who are woke to try and help the rest of us be woke, and that some of us have allowed for the other side to weaponize woke as being something bad or
right.
or something that is dangerous. Well, just the antithesis of the word woke means to be asleep.
Exactly.
Means to be unconscious.
Exactly.
So it simply means to be conscious and to be aware of the realities and the facts of what is going on, and look beyond the veneer of what it is you think you see. Because some black people think that we see that things have progressed and gotten better because you see some black men participating in a sport and that they're earning a few $1 million, when you're talking about a few people who are being paid a few $1 million, but they are still controlled and dictated to as to what they can do. And there are 32 white men who control their fate. At any moment, they can determine that you are no longer of any use.
Colin
And
Kaepernick.
right?
Kaepernick.
So, and that they will do what I read somewhere where it's called the hole in the fence syndrome, where you have
Okay.
the masses running to the fence and only a few people get through the holes of the fence, like the Michael Jordans or the Oprah Winfrey, and those people in those groups, as though somehow they are the measure of progression for Black folks, when in fact, individually, people have done well ever, even in slavery. You had the field slaves versus the house slave. The house slaves had certain privileges that the field slave didn't have. So individually, during slavery, you had some slaves that had better privileges than the others. So we can't look at this as on an individual basis or one or two people experiencing some level of success. Not that we are,
That's like
opposed.
that phenomena is a steam valve to keep things from blowing up, and that's how it's designed. So that if you do have a few people squeezing through that hole, then it depressurizes the rest of us and keeps us from, exploding basically against the oppression. And the thing that you said about the slaves, interestingly enough, two of the major uprisings, Denmark Vesey and Gabriel Prosser. Vesey was a free man in Charleston, South Carolina, and Prosser was a slave. Anyway, they organized thousands, or at least hundreds, of slaves for revolts. And they had one rule: do not inform the house Negroes. And in both cases, somebody told a house Negro who ran and told massa, and both of them were preempted because of that rule was broken. Because that's a mentality that you identify more with your oppressor than you do with your own people. And it's like, how we feeling today, massa? And that's what we're seeing with Black MAGA now. That's what we're seeing with them. That ain't, I mean, it's Trump made any secret of his hatred of Black people, and you support him. So the friend, how's it go? The enemy of my friend is I'm getting messed up. Bottom line is, if he hates all Black people and you love him, then you must hate all Black people. And if you're Black, then that includes you. So you must hate yourself. And self-hatred, I've been saying for over a half century now that the number one issue for Black America has not been, it's not economics, it's not politics, it's self-hatred. If we got that self-hatred out the way, then white man's ice would not be colder than the ice is sold in a Black store. And we would give each other more. And when you patronize, they don't feel like you owe it to them to patronize. They go out of their way to give you good service, and you go out of your way to patronize. That's part of it, just on the economic tip. But I've always felt that Black self-hatred, and it's not like it's a flaw. It's something that was drummed into us as slaves. And I think part of the Black MAGA is, I think part of what drives them is that Trump appears to be strong, even though he's a little punk. Trump ain't never been in a fight in his life. And I think if you smacked him, he'd run home crying. But he gives the appearance of virility. And I think some of us crave that because we don't understand our history or the power within the Black community. I mean, the things that we have accomplished against the odds are unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. You take away our inventions, there ain't nothing left. Trump gave a speech on how America invented everything, and everything he named was invented by us. Everything from doorknobs to traffic lights, you name it. We did it.
Right.
Beautiful.
Right.
And never really got to the point with all the reasons we've had to hate, we don't. And historically, if you had an interracial couple, they didn't move into a white community. They couldn't. They had to move into ours.
Right.
So But and the thing that I'm so upset about is the fact that they're wiping. We already don't know our history. Most of us have no clue. There was a brother. This guy asked a brother if what party fought against slavery. He said Democrats. So then he said, well, what party did Lincoln belong to? Democrats. And of course, what he did not know, then he got freaked out to find out that they were Republicans, But that only means something. What that means is only meaningful or real if you understand the transition that was made when they flip-flopped in the 1960s, where the Republicans became the party of racism, because of the Civil Rights Act, and Goldwater, opposed the Civil Rights Act. So all the racist Democrats went on over to the Republican Party, and they've been building on that racism ever since. They talk about how great a man Reagan was. Trump stands on Reagan's shoulders. People forget.
Without question.
That, Trump can do no wrong, right? Reagan's nickname was Teflon President. People forget that because he was messing up left and right, and they want to put him on Mount Rushmore. So
here's a man that could deal untold numbers of drugs for arms, and not be called a drug kingpin. There was no bigger drug dealer than Ronald Reagan.
And not only, the damage that we're suffering from the damage he did tremendously right now, because we wouldn't be in this mess if it wasn't for media outlets like Fox News, because they got a whole constituency living in another reality. Now, how did we get Fox News? We got Fox News because of Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan opened the floodgates, and Judge Bush put it on steroids that allowed conglomerates and stopped enforcing the antitrust laws and allowed for these conglomerates to become what they are today. It was Ronald Reagan that cut the top tier tax rate from 94% down to 35%. Whereas if you took more than $2 million a year out of your company, you had to pay 94 cents on every dollar over and above that, which made companies and CEOs reinvest in their companies. And they were our neighbors. We knew them. We knew who they were. They didn't live on these islands that they have been able to purchase as a result of Ronald Reagan. So I call it Ronald Reaganism. We're living 44 years of Ronald Reaganism. And even we lost 47,000 manufacturers, more than 9.5 million jobs, because Ronald Reagan allowed for shoring of our businesses. We would still be making most of our products here if it were not for Ronald Reagan. So much of what it is that we are experiencing comes from Ronald Reagan.
Well, we had two presidents in modern times endorsed by the KKK, Ronald Reagan and Trump. They are the two. Now, Reagan at least had the decency to say he didn't accept the endorsement, wink, 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 but he made white folks weren't feeling too good about themselves. And he told them, hey, we feel good about it because we're the masters of the universe, y'all. Okay, so that was his platform, and that's why they love him so much, despite the fact that he was such a horrible president, and not to mention the fact that we got Fox because he took out the clause that media had to be fair and balanced. That was just one of his many legacies, and Trump didn't even disavow he built on that and didn't even disavow the endorsement by the KKK. He was like cool with it, and he's endorsed. He's called Nazis fine people, and how can you run around with a cap on saying "Make America Great Again" and your chest stuck out as a black person supporting Trump? Okay, when he got his start on the birther movement, and you gonna say that wasn't racist?
Exactly.
On and on, from refusing to rent to black folk to so that is it's and they don't just the other thing is that, and Emmett pointed this out, why don't you guys call in to go find you, a pro-Trump station to listen to and call in? Why would you call into this station when you know where we're coming from, which is anti-Trump? I think it's their way of needling the people, because of their own self-hatred being manifest in saying that, yeah, I like Trump. His boy Nelly, he was one of the rappers that performed for Trump. I hope I'm not getting too hung up on Trump, but I don't know if you can. Anyway, Nelly got mad because he got the feedback, right? And this idiot said, I got paid, as if it was justification. And nobody told that fool that selling out means you got paid. You don't, right. Nobody accused you of giving out. You got accused of selling out.
Right. Right. Well, that is my take. I haven't watched an NFL football game since 2016, since the calling of Colin Kaepernick, because Colin Kaepernick was me. Colin Kaepernick is you. Every black person is Colin Kaepernick. With the 32 NFL football owners basically said to Colin Kaepernick, we're going to give you a few dollars, but you will never, ever put another suit, a football suit, never play on any one of these 32 football fields ever again. You will not be able to use our platform to call attention to our racism. Said to every other player, this is what will happen to you if you step out of line.
That's right.
Now, what is so dangerous to me is that every Sunday, or starting on Friday, millions of black folks all over the country are gearing up to sit and jeer and cheer at an event that, because a few black men are playing in, but in an event that you really are not welcome. You are not welcome.
Well, they really reestablished that firmly by giving tribute to Charlie Kirk. I mean, really?
Without question.
Huh?
Without question.
All but 4 teams did tributes to this man, a stone straight up racist, and they're deifying him. And that tells you where we are right there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so what I try to convey to black people is do not think that you have to exact hate on people as they are doing it on us. That's not the answer. No, the answer is to understand where we are and then make sure that we put ourselves in a position to resist and fight back, because whenever we do it, we win in a corporate collective manner. So I cannot make racist, hateful white people love me, as Dr. King said, but I can make them behave differently.
That's right.
I can make them behave differently. So when the Cubs decided that they were going to do a tribute to Charlie Kirk, that was the last Cub game that I will ever watch, because you basically sending a message, and I think it's deliberate. I think it's deliberate to send a message to black people that we control this. We control this. We dominate it, and to use that as a subtle message that we are protecting our whiteness. We are going to refortify our whiteness. Now, this whole thing about make America great again, I keep asking people, when was America great?
Right.
When was America great? And I had my former co-host, who was the political reporter over at Channel 7. He was my co-host, and he has become, in my opinion, MAGA. And he said, well, America was great during the civil rights movement. I said, no, America was not great. I said,
right.
no, America was not great. I said, America got a little bit better, but it was not great. Well, what about when America passed the Voting Rights Act? I said, it got a little bit better, but it was not great. I said, there is no time that America was great. America has made.
Let me ask you, is he old enough to have lived through the civil rights era?
Yeah, he's older than me. He's older than me.
Okay, because obviously he didn't remember how they did the people on the bridge, all the people that got killed during that era, all the people who were beaten, had coffee and stuff poured on their heads for sitting in a counter, and you think that was America being great? What's wrong with you? That's what I mean about lack of history, and that's why I am so upset with them banning books. And this punk Hexa they took all of Maya Angelou and everybody black, all the books out of the naval libraries, and kept Mein Kampf, which is Hitler's autobiography. Okay, and they are when you take away the history, then you don't know who you are, and we're already lost because so many of us have no clue as to how we got here. If we understood that history, we'd be interacting with this differently. And the other part of that is the fact that everybody wants to be comfortable. I mean, it's just natural. But we can't afford it because we're in the same war that's been going on since the Civil War. It's taken different forms and manifestations, but we haven't won that war. The South is the one that's been kicking behind in that war in terms of the war of the narrative and the fact that we got sold out by first Johnson and then Hayes. Rutherford B. Hayes made a deal with them that he would withdraw the troops from the South in exchange for the presidency to allow the Klan and all these people to come back and start terrorizing black folk all over again. So if we understand that, if we understand what we pushed against, what we've had to overcome, that in itself fortifies us, but we don't. So then you get this idea of what you would call natural order of things. We're on the bottom because we're supposed to be. We just landed that way, and they landed on top because of their superiority. It had nothing to do with slavery or anything like that. And now somebody like Nikki Haley is considered a moderate who wouldn't even mention slavery in terms of the Civil War. And that's a moderate. That's why I'm saying, the false equivalency. Bernie Sanders should be in the middle, not the far left. There's no far left, but that's what we're struggling with.
Yeah, I get challenged with these labels: left, right, liberal, progressive, conservative. I think that they're all labels of distractions from what really should be, because it is what is right and what is wrong. That's what it is.
You're singing my song. You're singing my song.
Yeah, the Republicans are not on the right because they're right, and the Democrats are not on the left because they're some sort of liberals. The question becomes, what is right and what is wrong? That's the bottom line. Is it wrong that we have a president that would give billions of dollars to Venezuela and to Argentina, two nations for which there is universal health care, and then strip away the ability for people to afford care here in this country, and then to further give tax breaks and cuts to people who don't need it at the tune of $347,000 a year.
Well, that's an evil, yeah.
Poor and working class people.
Mm-hmm. No, it is about right and wrong. I mean, you're singing my song, and it's about evil. But see, once you dress evil up in politics, then it legitimizes it. So now you have to, once again, going back to the, going down the middle. You don't go for right versus wrong. You go right down the middle between right and wrong. Okay,
right.
And that's what's happening with it, because you just touched on the very tip of the iceberg, and we could both sit here for what, 4 or 5 hours and just talk about how the rotten, wrong things and the absurdity of this situation is what blows my mind. That we have like the worst, one of the worst people on the whole planet with no redeeming qualities whatsoever, none. And you made him president of the United States, a liar, a rapist, a racist, a white nationalist, and a criminal. A grifter, a pedophile.
Everything that was antithetical to what we were told about what a representative should be. Forget about their views, but certainly if they had questionable character, there was no way that they could even be considered to be a candidate for the highest office in the land.
You can't work for the federal government. You can't work for the post office with all them felonies, I don't think. I could be wrong. But how can you be president with 34 felonies and you had a whole bunch more of them pending, And
well, you couldn't even get a barber's license if you had that many convictions.
And I got no sympathy for James Comey. I ain't got no sympathy for him, because he helped put him in the first place.
Yeah, I don't. James Comey. I have no emotions about James Comey. However, what I do object to is the absolute bastardization and violation of the enforcement of the Constitution and the law. That's my only support there. But in terms of having, being a fan of James Comey, right. I am not a fan of James Comey. Right. But I certainly will be a defender of the law and the Constitution. Yeah. Right. And so I don't want for people to conflate the two or to confuse the two, that I somehow support James Comey. I don't. I support what is right or what is wrong. Mm-hmm. That's where I look at it. And here you have one of my committee members. We were going back and forth, and he was asking me about should we go and collaborate with Indivisible. Indivisible is having a No Kings Day. I was like, well, what do we need to do that for? We don't need to. There's nothing that we need to do. Black folks did what Black folks were supposed to do more than any other ethnic group on November 5th of 2024. 92% of Black women, 79% of Black men went to the polls and voted against Trump. 53% of white women, 39% of Hispanic men, and 85% of white men voted for Donald Trump. Black folks did what they are supposed to do. This is a problem that white folks created and did. Let them fix it. They're responsible. So there's nothing for us to do. We don't have to take to the streets with them. We didn't do it. We did what we were supposed to do.
Well, we've been rescuing them from themselves since we've been in this country, because of that dysfunction that they have going on, which I have some theories about that, but it's a severe dysfunction for them. Just the fact that they can hate us like they do. I actually looked into a white man's eyes and saw his hatred for me. It's the scariest thing I've ever experienced. It was so intense, so profound, and I ain't no punk, but this scared the heck out of me. I mean, it was bone chilling, and I knew looking into his eyes that he would kill me if he had a chance. I knew it.
Mm-hmm.
He communicated that. And you look at these acts that they have performed, and we've been like the humanizing factor. We brought legitimacy where there was none. And so, but we can't keep doing it all the time. They got to grow up. They got to heal themselves from all
Absolutely.
that hatred.
Absolutely.
They were white folk. Rather than let us swim in the pool, they would fill up the pool. Okay, they'd rather starve than see you and me eat. That is the essence of disconnection.
That's the empty pool syndrome.
Yeah, and it's the essence of stagnation, and that's why I have no hope of them ever overcoming that racism, because they're stagnant. It's part of a whole concept I developed around disconnection when I wrote my book. But Reagan told them that Social Security would be the end of democracy. They believed him. 50 years later, here comes Chuck Norris. Affordable Care Act is going to be the end of democracy. They believed him. They love the Affordable Care Act, but they hate Obamacare. Okay, and we bring the legitimacy, but I think to a certain extent, because I think we're losing a lot of our mojo. I think we are an incredibly powerful people, but I think some of it's being lost because I don't know that we're as grounded as we once were. I don't know that we are maintaining our relationship with the elders and with the ancestors. And I believe that they have fed us. There's
certainly a delusion that has caused a couple of generations, and I would certainly say that it started with our generations, or my generation, that started having children and started to compromise what our parents did. Our parents took us to community meetings, whether we wanted to go or not. They took us to community meetings. We had to sit there in the town halls. Our parents were engaged in what was going on in our communities, in our churches. They were engaged in what was going on and took us to it. We started having children and started treating our children like they were privileged, and started to somehow pasteurize them from our history. And so you have a couple of generations of entitled mentality. So I think that's where we have failed, and we've missed is with my generation that started having children, and I call it I'm not gonna make my kids do what my mom and daddy made me do. And when we allow for that to seep in, that is a weapon.
I believe in spanking. I do not believe in ironing cords. Don't nobody need to hear that book like I got. I mean, I believe in spanking.
Yeah.
But you do that early, and then you don't have to.
But what we believe in is the discipline.
Oh, absolutely.
The discipline. The ironing cord, not understanding it, but it's the discipline.
Yeah,
absolutely. It is the discipline.
One of the things from history I was thinking about is two things. One, I used to work in textbook publishing, and I put Kwanzaa in the textbooks. This was before it became very popular. So they would have been like the first textbooks to have Kwanzaa in them. And white folks took it back out. But I went to war with these people, risking my little livelihood every single day because it was a racist place. The only reason why there were any black people there was because the people in Detroit, the adoption committee in Detroit wanted to know how many black people they had working there, and they didn't have any. So all the black folks that worked there had been hired in the prior year and a half in this whole thing. But so that's a personal thing that I have with why I can't stand people who are okay with them wiping out our history. And another thing is that going back to the lack of respect for knowledge and understanding, I have told so many young people about how you could get killed for learning how to read because it was so dangerous for you to know how to read. Because if you knew stuff, you were a threat to them. And they don't understand that. Nobody's taught them that. Nobody's taught them that. And these are crucial pieces of information. And one last thing, and then I'll shut up, but my emphasis is on the mythology. I think all of it rests on American mythology, all those lies they tell. And so I try to attack that whenever I can. The Puritans did not come here for religious freedom. Okay, they came here to impose. They had freedom in Europe, but they couldn't tie somebody to a boat and throw them in the river and say if they drowned, they were innocent of being a witch. And if they lived, they were guilty and didn't burn them to the stake. They couldn't do that in Europe. So that's what they came here for. Davy Crockett and them were not fighting for freedom at the Alamo. They were fighting for the right to own slaves. Mexico refused to implement the Fugitive Slave Act that was going on in America. And the founding fathers were not Christians, okay? Some of them were, but a whole lot of them weren't. Most of them were deists, okay? And how many people know that?
Well, just because they had Bibles doesn't mean that they were people who followed the spirit of Christ. They may use the principles, but not necessarily have the heart.
Well, yeah, I gave a lecture on spirituality at a Christian church, Christian college here. And man, I was supposed to have been educating them, but they educated me. I learned more from them than I taught them because they weren't open to what I was teaching. But what I found out was that there's two different Christianities. And we say, well, they're not acting like Christians. Yes, they are. They're Christians because their Christ doesn't have long hair. This dude wears a crew cut in army boots. He's an American, okay? And he stands up for white people because they're the chosen people. And if you can't get with your program, that's on you. And I did not understand that until I gave a lecture. I started out by saying the first two rules of spirituality. One is that religion is an accident of birth. If you're born in a Christian country, you'll probably be Christian. If you're in a Muslim country, you'll probably be Muslim. And that we are all the same in terms of the energy and life force, and what unites us should be stronger than what binds us, because we all have the same spiritual abilities. They got so mad at that, it wasn't funny. It blew me away. That infuriated me because it was an attack on their superiority, and I didn't realize that's what I was doing.
Right. Well, in terms of one's faith, it's also, I don't, it may be an attack on their superiority, but in terms of faith, I also think that it is an uncertainty of what you believe, because if you believe and you have a faith commitment, then nothing anybody can say to you is going to deter you from what you believe and know to be true in your own spiritual development. And I can listen to a person who happens to have spirituality, and they may have a different faith commitment than I have. but that's not going to make me abandon what my faith commitment is.
Well,
I
if you're spiritual and they're spiritual, you all are going to communicate. That
Right.
I separate spirituality and religion because they are different. There is an overlap.
They are different.
But religion without spirituality is evil. It's one of the worst, strongest things where spirituality makes people want to reach out and commune with others. Religion without it wants to separate themselves from others. So they are exactly opposite. They're totally opposite, and that religion, part of it, I mean, they have this need to justify themselves in terms of superiority, and they do it through religion. I mean, look at Manifest Destiny. What kind of ego provides for Manifest Destiny to say that this land, it's like from the Old Testament, this land, all land from here to the Pacific Ocean is ours because God said we're supposed to have it. And that's the same kind of mentality that they took advantage of indigenous people in Africa and America, because nobody else thought they could own land because the land belonged to the Creator. It took mentality to say, I own that mountain. How you gonna own a mountain? How you gonna own a stream? That's God's stuff. But that's all tied with that insecurity that you spoke of, and that need to suppress others, and that greed, and so you need some kind of justification for all the foul things that you're doing to people around the globe. We ain't gonna talk about Christopher Columbus and Francisco Pizarro and those guys. Woo, Cortez. I mean, evil.
All right, I'm gonna have to wrap it up there. William Griggs. Listen, I want to thank you for coming. I've really enjoyed this time, and I'm going to ask you to come back and so that we can do this on more than just one occasion. So
I enjoyed it.
I'll reach out to you, and we will talk about how we can formulate this. I think the audience was enriched, and we look forward to doing it again.
I thank you much. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you so much. William Griggs, people. All right, folks, we're going to continue on with the program. And there is so much that we need to talk about. One of the things that I want to share, and I'm going to try to get to as much of the news as possible. I have been trying to upload that news story that about the raid that took place or the invasion that took place over on 75th Street, that I believe that is tantamount to what I've been trying to warn us together about in terms of really understanding not to ingrain this hate with about migrants, Hispanic people, and people who are different from us. The scripture clearly tells us that we have to be careful on how we entertain strangers. We have to be careful on how we treat foreigners, because we were once foreigners. And the idea that we, as Black people in America, would take on the behavior of the oppressor. This was a conversation that I had with a Jewish rabbi many years ago in Louisville, Kentucky. He said one of the problems that he observed about the Black community is that we started modeling the behavior of the oppressor on ourselves, and I see us modeling that behavior on other people, and becoming the emissary for the oppressor. Now, we have to be very, very aware of how we allow for ourselves to engage in this process. Do not allow for yourself to sink into the abyss of hating other people who are struggling and just want the opportunity that in order to provide for themselves, but to be an emissary for the oppressor who really wants to crush us all. And in this case, you have a sect that has taken over our federal government, and it is seeping into our local politics. MAGA and Trumpism is seeping into our local politics. I assign MAGA, in my opinion, to the Cook County State's attorneys, and that is Eileen O'Neill Burke, when she was a judge who sentenced a 10-year-old to prison who had nothing to do with a murder. And still and yet, many of us voted for her and sent her to the office that she is now in. And as a result of getting there, one of the first things that she did is that she decided that she was going to turn the police loose on Black men by violating due process and violating the Constitution. And many of us are sitting by silent or just going along with this type of authoritarianism as though it is okay. It is seeping into our local governments. So therefore, you have to be careful. We have to be careful not to allow for ourselves to be sucked into this posture of us versus them. Hispanic people are not your problem. Migrants are not your problem. Hatred is our problem. And the people who exact that hate by using our government that you and I largely fund, because the lion's share of the tax dollars that go to the government that they have power over comes from poor people and working class people. Those are the two groups that contribute most money to our governments, local, state, and federal. It is not the wealthy. The wealthy hoard and is greed. The people who fund our government come from the poor and working class people, by and large. That is where it comes from. We pay more into the tax coffers than the wealthy does. So therefore, which is why it is so vitally important that we fight and we challenge the systems to provide basic necessities for the poor, for the working class, because those are the two groups that contribute the lion's share of tax revenue to fund our governments. So these are not people who are getting handouts. When you start talking about people who are getting public aid and the people who are getting food assistance program or Medicare and Medicaid, these are not people who are drab on the government. These people are funding the government. They contribute as much or more to the government than many of the super wealthy. If you take the middle class out, the government will collapse because the wealthy don't contribute their fair share. So the point is that you have got to really seriously do some heart checking. Don't just jump on these bandwagons as though somehow these people are our enemies. See, before they were jumping on gay people, had you watching gay people, paying attention to gay people while they export your jobs out of town. Gay people weren't your problem then, and migrants aren't your problem today. All of this is a distraction for those people who have privilege and power and believe that they're entitled to it, to exact whatever it is that they want to do. And so it is incumbent upon us to understand. Look at what the Supreme Court is getting ready to consider. The Supreme Court is getting ready to consider a case. Right now, the Supreme Court is getting ready to consider a case on write-in ballots. So they will deal with the question and are dealing with the question on this coming Wednesday. And depending on the answer of that question, could open up broad avenues for this president to manipulate the elections coming in the midterms. And it all has to do with a case surrounding the question of mail-in election ballots. And here is the case that is in question is the case of Bost, B-O-S-T versus Illinois, which focuses on mail-in ballots and specifically addresses who has the right to challenge them. So the court is going to weigh whether allegations of possible or future injury to a federal candidate's campaign, like costs associated with counting or verifying mail-in ballots up to 2 weeks after the election has taken place, or election day, which are enough to give that person the right or standing to sue. So the case originates from Representative Mike Bost, who's a Republican from Illinois, a Trump ally, which involved in the effort to overturn then President Biden's 2020 victory, and the Republican presidential electors Laura Palestrini and Susan Sweeney, all of whom who sued the Illinois State Board of Election in 2022. Now, their claim was that allowing mail-in ballots to be counted after the election has held as illegal, and pointed to 2 clauses of the Constitution that govern the schedule for counting votes. Illinois state law allows ballots cast in federal elections to be counted for up to 14 days after Election Day, provided the ballot was postmarked or certified before Election Day. The United States Supreme Court is going to hear this case on Wednesday. I have said it to us on several occasions that Illinois, in the landscape of Illinois, predominantly is a red, outside of Chicago, Cook County, is largely red. But it is Chicago and Cook County that determines that Illinois is a blue state, which is why it is so important for us to understand why our vote and why our political organized efforts have to be corporate, and that we have to understand that there are enemies, and there are enemies who want to infiltrate Illinois by infiltrating Chicago and Cook County. The mayoral election is coming up, and you hear people talking about Brandon Johnson and have even said to me, doesn't sound like you support Brandon Johnson. Listen, I can be very critical of a policy and separate that from my support for the position. I am very critical of a policy that wasn't instituted by Brandon Johnson, although Brandon Johnson has contributed like his predecessor did. I am critical of that, and I will continue to be critical of it, and I will continue to provide the supporting arguments against it. It is a bad decision for Brandon Johnson, just like it was a bad decision for Lori Lightfoot, just like it was a bad decision for Rahm Emanuel, just like it was a bad decision for Daley, who instituted the program. However, Brandon Johnson didn't sell the parking meter at a fire sale, giving away a $10 to $12 billion asset at the time for $1 billion. And the company that bought it got a 75-year lease, and they've earned their money back in less than 15 years. That happened by Daley. You didn't say a word. Rahm Emanuel got rid of the head tax and instituted speed cameras to make up for the loss of revenue. But not that the companies would be paying it, but that you, everyday working class people and poor people, would be the piggy bank. All of this, closed 50 schools. Rahm Emanuel did that. And then you still reelected him. Then you elected Lori Lightfoot. Lori Lightfoot turned the tables and went completely antithetical to that she had campaigned to. Much of the damage that we are seeing came as a result of 23 years of Daley, 8 years of Rahm Emanuel. So Brandon Johnson is not the person who is responsible for decades of abuse, decades of creating this situation, decades of a person by the name of a criminal, a federally criminally convicted felon of Ed Burke, a criminally convicted felon of Ed Verdoliak. And I don't want to hear anything about, they're Democrats. They are criminals who perpetrated a fraud on the people of Chicago. So I can be critical of Brandon Johnson on an issue, but I also am going to be fair and balanced about who is actually responsible for it. I believe Brandon is 100% correct, along with the governor, of saying to the president that you don't get to assign your name to the work that many other people have been doing to bring violent crimes down in Chicago, to bring the homicide rate down in Chicago. And then certainly until the homicide rate is zero, we're not going to be satisfied. But bringing the homicide rate from 600, 700 to 300, that's 500, 400 fewer families that are victims. That's 500 fewer shooters and murders of life that we don't have. Yes, 300 is too much. 800, 900. So that means that we saved, through the hard work that many people are doing, that we've saved hundreds of lives, billions of dollars in cost. So those tools are working. We have to continue to invest in people and not on people. Invest in people and not on people. When you invest in people, that means that you provide an infrastructure for people to thrive, to participate in. When you invest on people is when you are providing a system for people to be preyed on for the benefit of a preferential few. That's investing on people. Red light cameras and speed cameras are investing on people. Gaming, video, gambling, that is investing on people, not in people. Meaning people are being manipulated and used to be the wealth builders of somebody else's coffers. So it is important that we do the hard work. We roll up our sleeves and we find the ways to bring the kinds of accesses to opportunities and careers that more and more people from our communities can participate in, that they can earn six-figure salaries to be able to provide for themselves and to provide for their families, and thusly expand the tax base and contribute to the tax base to make sure that we can provide the kinds of services, whether it be health, whether it be law enforcement, to make sure that our communities are safe, that our educational institutions are strong and healthy and thriving and powerful for our communities. That's the hard work. That is the work that has to be done. It's not complex, but it's hard work. These are not complicated issues. I don't believe that they're complicated issues. They may be complex in terms of how we make them happen, but they're not complicated. Again, it's what's right or what's wrong, not what's in the middle. What's right or what is wrong. So what is wrong is this person that we have in public office, this person that we have as the President of the United States. But they're the president. And 74 million of you thought that this would be the better way for us to go, rather than you supporting a woman who happened to be black. 39% of Hispanic men, 53% of white women, 85, 86% of white men voted for this. I got a call the other night. Some of you may have heard not a call, but a text asking me whether or not we should participate in Indivisible with the No King's Day. This problem is not a problem that we created. There is no greater block of voters that participated in the 2024 elections on November the 5th of 2024. No other group. Black folks, 78% of black men, 92% of black women. The largest voting block of any ethnic group did what we were supposed to do on November the 5th. So those of you, it is not for us to go stand side by side with Indivisible. It is for the white community that decided that this was better to then fix it. Now, we will be there in support, but we're not going to be on the front lines so that Donald Trump can put federal agents out, gas, and send tear gas on black folks, and then use that as an excuse to talk about how violent people were. There is nothing for us to do. There is no march for us to go march in. This is the fight that the white community, by and large, must fix. In particular, 53% of white women who decided that this was the better alternative. Now, they may never acknowledge it. They may never acknowledge it publicly. But it is not for us to get out and to go and put ourselves in harm's way while you have a person like Donald Trump who will use an excuse, just like he's trying to use the excuse of coming to Chicago or sending reservists to Chicago that violates the law. No, we don't need to, there's nothing for us to prove. We did what we were supposed to do in November. There's nothing that we have to prove on that front. Now, what we do have to prove is we have to get ourselves together. We have to get ourselves together. I'm going to put it in the chat. I'm going to put it in the chat. So those of you, if you have not, I'm going to put the text alert in the text and ask if you have not, gotten into the text alert, please get into the text alert and join us on Thursday night. We are organizing to build the strongest, most powerful Black independent voting bloc right here in Chicago and Cook County in the state of Illinois. Why? Because we have the numbers. We don't have the organization, but we have the number. When I say organized, I mean organized as our political action committee, our political arm. Your organizations keep doing the work that we're doing, but we're joining ourselves together as a voting bloc. And then as a voting bloc, we internally decide on who it is that we want to have as candidates in every respective office, from your village mayor, to your trustees, to your state senator, your state representative, to your United States congressperson, your United States senator, the mayor of the city of Chicago, your Cook County commissioners, your judges. We have the wherewithal to build that kind of institution, to have that kind of power. And when you have that kind of power, the people who are in power will respect you and thusly be respecting our communities, because to respect you means that they are respecting what we need and want and desire for our communities. That is how you influence power. The exact same way that they influence power over Disney, ABC, Next Star, Starlight, all these, when the people decided that they were going to fight back and they're going to fight back with their money, they withheld $6 billion. And Jimmy Kimmel thusly came back on the air, because they understand one thing: money. And when the money is being jeopardized, then you make them behave different. You're not changing their hearts. We're not getting focused and changing their hearts, because you are not going to change their heart. By and large, you're not going to change their heart. We hope one day that they will have a come to Jesus moment and that they will change their heart. But until then, we can make them change their conduct. We can make them think more for serving people than for them serving themselves. All right, let me switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about this raid that took place on the Southside. And again, that's the warning that we have to understand, is that when you saw this MAGA administration trying to demonize migrants, and some of us bought into it, to demonize migrants, that should be a real warning, because it wasn't going to stop there, and it is not stopped there. Look at what happened last week, where they brought in Black Hawk military helicopters, over 100 federal agents, allegedly they were federal agents that came to our communities in the dead of night to inflict the kind of harm that they inflicted. Let's take a look at this story.
I spoke to one woman who actually lives in this building, and she says she was detained by ICE agents overnight, and she says they took everyone and then asked questions later.
They just treated us like we were nothing.
Patricia Fisher says she came out to the hallway of her apartment complex on the corner of 75th and South Shore Drive in her nightgown around 10 Monday night, only to find ICE agents yelling police.
It was scary because I've never had a gun put in my face. They asked my name and my date of birth and asked me did I have any warrants, and I told them no, I didn't.
She says she was then handcuffed and released around 3 a.m. Fisher says she was told if anyone had any kind of warrant out for them, even if it was unrelated to immigration, they would not be released. Citizen App video shows the chaotic scene overnight. Neighbors tell us there were dozens of ICE agents. Neighbors like Ebony Watson says they ducked for cover as they heard several flashbangs go off.
They was terrified. The kids was crying. People was screaming. They looked very distraught. I was out there crying when I seen the little girl come around the corner. Because they was bringing the kids out too. Had them zip tied to each other. And that's all I kept asking. Where's the morality? Where's the human? One of them literally laughed. He was standing right here. He said, them kids.
Watson says budget trucks and military-style vans were used to separate parents from their children. Other neighbors say they saw agents destroying property to get in the building.
And they had a big 15-inch chainsaw with a round blade on it, cutting this fence down. We're under siege. We're being invaded by our own military.
The FBI did confirm this morning that they did help the U.S. Border Patrol carry out a targeted immigration enforcement operation in this area, and they say they have been supporting these efforts at the direction of the U.S. Attorney General.
At the directives of the U.S. Attorney General, and they just happen to do this in a black community. That is the target all along. And because you have a few ignorant, meaning ill-informed individuals who are ignorant of their history and ignorant of the facts, frustrated by and sort of radicalized. Maybe you're frustrated with some things within the Democratic makeup. I am also frustrated. But what you don't do is you don't blow up the entire system. You get engaged, you get involved to fix those things that are not well. I dare say that if your car broke down and you were having some mechanical issues, maybe a tie rod was broken or a sway bar was broken or needed to be replaced, I dare say that you would not go and completely get rid of your car. What you would do is you would take your car to the repair, take your car to the shop, and you would have your car serviced to have the parts that went bad replaced with new parts so that the car is running as well as it did before there was a breach on certain components of the car. That's the same thing with the Democratic Party. Those areas that are not working well, we, the people, organize ourselves together to infiltrate those areas, to make the kinds of demands that we need to make, that those areas are improved and that they work on behalf of our people. That's organized, strategic engagement. Not this stuff that you see some people getting on TikToks and making these videos, especially those who think that somehow they have this profound insight. I saw some idiot who had on a MAGA hat just a few hours ago, and he was on there exposing just how ignorant and ill-informed that he was. He was on there talking about the president giving HBCUs $500 million. Well, you know, every president from the early 1960s has been giving and supporting HBCUs, but none has supported HBCUs at the level or even close to the level of what the Biden-Harris administration did for HBCUs by giving HBCUs $16.5 billion, $16.5 billion to HBCUs. No president has ever come close. And in fact, the last 3 or 4 presidents have not come close to what this one president has done. And that is President Joe Biden. So him, yelling and beating on his chest about $500 million that Trump has given to HBCUs. That might be the $500 million that is owed to HBCUs that was supposed to be put in the nursery. So be aware. Be aware. They went and zip-tied children, mothers, fathers, violating these people's constitutional rights and violating their protection under the Constitution. I think that each one of those persons has a legitimate argument for suing ICE. And I hope that they do. Certainly, I hope that the Attorney General is able to deal with this situation. But now, importantly, I hope that the rest of us understand what the objective is here. The objective is not those people that they're going at. The objective is if they can get away with it, like if they could have gotten away with Jimmy Kimmel and others along the way, if they could get away with not taking care, if they can get away with it with them, then they would be able to legitimately get away with it with us. That's what this is all about. Now, the president, and I said I was going to play it for you last week, and I didn't have a chance to do it, but I'm going to play it for you this week. This is the president and prime minister of the Barbados that spoke at the United Nations. And she gave a lecture ripping the United States about respecting their statehood. This is Mia Motley, who was or is a Barbadian politician. She's an attorney who has served as the 8th Prime Minister of Barbados since 2018. She was elected by the Labour Party. Let's listen.
To this effect, the Security Council we know must be reformed. It must reflect the multipolar world that we now live in, and it must give an opportunity to recognize that there have been substantial geopolitical shifts since 1962 when you had your last reform, 3 years before I was born, and I turn 60 next week. Permanent seats for Africa and a seat that revolves for small island developing states are an essential part of that reform, because we all have perspectives that must be heard. You cannot ask us really to show up for family photos and votes when you need them, and then exclude us from the family's decision-making as if you are the grown-ups and we are the children. We are not minors. We are independent, sovereign states with full capacity, and we insist on being treated as such. Madam President, I have left the peace and security of our Caribbean region for last. It is deeply troubling. Example, Haiti, and you've heard Prime Minister Gonzalez speak eloquently this morning on these matters. Haiti, which was once a beacon of emancipation and revolution for all of us as black people, is today a victim of centuries of external interference and contemporary internal conflict, and regrettably, even blindness. We want to thank Kenya for its extraordinary leadership of the multinational security support mission, even when they were out there on their own. We look forward to the enhanced support of the UN Security Council and the Organization of American States, even as we maintain a strong watch and brief for this valued member of our Caribbean community as CARICOM. Haiti requires, I've said it over and over, a long-term support plan that addresses security and development, not one at the expense of the other. With the requisite political will, the UN Security Council and the international development system are well equipped. They have the resources and power to deliver. We also want to urge dialogue with our friends and partners, especially in the United States, on the inescapable issue on the flow of small arms and light weapons, not only to Haiti, but indeed across this entire hemisphere, especially in the Caribbean with small states. Fragile economies in the democracies of the Caribbean community are now being threatened by this incessant flow of illegally obtained weapons and increasingly organized criminal elements which utilize them. But we will use the systems to deal with them collectively and in accordance with due process. We thank Secretary General Guterres for his unswerving support with respect to Haiti, and we now need others on board to ensure that Haiti can turn the corner and prepare itself for free and fair democratic elections. Madam President, Cuba has long been a source of support for many across the globe in times of conflict, health crises, and indeed colonial resistance, particularly in Africa. Cuba has paid, however, a high price for insisting on its right to self-determination. And again, yet again, we must be prepared to engage in dialogue in order to stop the disproportionate suffering and the deprivation that is being inflicted on the Cuban society by what is now globally seen to be an unjust embargo and other unilateral coercive measures. Barbados, my friends, reiterates its call for the end of the embargo and the removal of Cuba from the list of state sponsors of terrorism. This is unjust. What is even more, in the Caribbean Sea, we're now seeing a shocking violation of a hemispheric understanding that the Caribbean be treated as a zone of peace. There has been a buildup in military assets in the last few weeks in the Caribbean by both sides, by the United States of America and by Venezuela. We believe that any such buildup could occasion just an accident. And if it does, a simple accident can put the Southern Caribbean at disproportionate risk. I need not tell you, therefore, what a war can do. It is not acceptable for our islands, our countries, to be viewed as collateral damage. I say simply, for all who can hear and for all who read and can listen, full respect for the territorial integrity of each and every state in the Caribbean must be respected, and that includes all states. Almost all wars end as a result of dialogue. Let us make a greater effort to have the necessary conversations to prevent war. It is too simple. As I close today, I leave you with an image that has stayed with me for the last week of a young Palestinian girl of 6 or 7 years old walking in the midst of the rubble in Gaza. Her eyes were hollow and full of despair. It was clear that she was in great pain, but she carried her sister on her shoulders, both shoulders. clearly recognizing that it was she who would have to carry the burden of taking them to safety. My friends, this is the ultimate picture for me of hope and resilience. Let us be inspired that even in the face of the greatest adversity and challenges that the world faces, that we too can rise. For if a 6-year-old can push past the pain, all the physical and emotional pain, and still find hope that there's a better moment ahead of her, then we as leaders and members of the global community have a duty to summon that spirit. The world needs it now more than ever. It is not beyond us to forge a better world that is fair and just. 80 years ago, it was just a few countries that summoned that will. Today, those of us who were denied the right to be heard then must now be the core responders to this critical clarion call. I leave you inspired by the words of my own anthem as I think about the world. Inspired, I say, upwards and onwards we shall go, inspired, exulting, free, and greater will our world grow in strength and unity. If a 6-year-old child can summon the will against all that she faced, then we, with much, much, much more, and with a commitment and an obligation to many, 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 many more, must summon that will. I thank you.
Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of the Barbados. Her speech was much longer, but I wanted to caption and of course, I had never heard her before, but when I heard that meandering, babbling insult of the other leaders of the developed world at the United Nations by the bumbling, disastrous performance of the President of the United States, that's supposed to be the leader of the free world, supposed to be the example, and absolutely she shredded the nonsense. I mean, he got up telling all of the other the leaders of the free world that somehow that climate change and the melting of the glaciers, that somehow it is a big hoax. It is a scam, is the word that he used at the United Nations, and told them if they didn't get off of that scam horse, that they were not going to have a country. This is what what the President of the United States insulted the other leaders at the United Nations. And then with this performance that they gave in front of the hundreds of generals at Quantico was just disastrous, And what we see happening in other places around the country. Certainly, I applaud Governor Pritzker, Brandon Johnson, the congressional representation here, all standing firm, standing in opposition to this. I certainly support those judges that have stood firm on the Constitution. And one of the judges in South Carolina, home burnt within 24 hours after ruling against Donald Trump. You may have seen that South Carolina judges, her house was destroyed by a fire, and it's being investigated. There were 3 people in the house. 3 people had escaped from the home and were hospitalized. We're not quite sure of what the conditions were. South Carolina judges, Judge Diane Goodstein's house in Adista Island went up in flames on Sunday. Potential arson is suspected, and again, there are 3 people who were hospitalized. She is a circuit court judge that was walking her dogs on the beach in Edisto Island, South Carolina, about an hour south of Charleston when the fire began, according to officials. Her husband, former state senator Arlen Goodson, their son Arnold Goodson III, and 1 other occupant were forced to jump from the burning building from an elevated first floor to escape the blaze. The 3 occupants were rescued by kayak from the home's backyard due to the area's marshy terrain. Culleton County Fire Rescue told ABC News 1 occupant was airlifted to Medical University of South Carolina Hospital in Charleston, and the other 2 were taken there via ground transportation, according to the Culleton Fire Rescue. This is because she ruled, well, allegedly, it is that it happened where she ruled against the judge, and this was a judge that was appointed by Donald Trump, ruled against Donald Trump with a temporary restraining order that did not allow for him to bring troops to Oregon. And she also ruled against Trump of blocking him from bringing troops to Oregon. Now, this is where we are. This is the reality of where we are and what we must continue to stand against. But we must fortify. We must fortify ourselves, because these efforts are going to continue, and we need to make sure that we are in the position that we need to be in, and not to pretend that somehow that this is not reality and that it will not come to our doorsteps. And when I say our doorsteps, I mean the doorsteps of the Black community, because it's at the doorsteps of the Black community, clearly, what they did on 75th and South Shore. That hasn't happened in any other community. And it just so happened that when it happened in a Black community. I hope you're paying attention. And if you were on that train of frustration, that you blew up the whole family because you were frustrated and you jumped over into the enemy's camps, that's very unfortunate. But you now have a clear picture, a very clear picture. I'm not going to be so much to go as to say that it's self-hate, but it's certainly misguided. It's certainly misguided, and we have to do better. All right, I want to thank you all for tuning in to the program. I want to thank my guest for filling in for Monroe Anderson, Brother William Griggs. We're going to have him back again You spent the first hour with us. I want to thank all of you who tuned in to the broadcast. Please like and share, and go to our YouTube channel, Mark J. Wallace, The People Show. Register there. There is no cost. And I'll see you next week right back here on Intellectual Radio and iHeartRadio.